Everyone, we will learn the four basic concepts of object-oriented programming. They are encapsulation, abstraction, inheritance, and polymorphism. Let's see each of these concepts. Before object-oriented programming, we have procedural-oriented programming, in which the program is divided into set of functions. So we have data which is stored on variables and the functions that operate on these data. This level of programming is very simple and straightforward, as it is a basic programming concept which you will learn in the university. As your program grows, you will see a bunch of functions all over which will have same line of code copy pasted. To solve this problem, we have object oriented programming. In object oriented programming, we combine the group of variables and functions into a unit called objects. We call the variables as properties and the functions as method. So for example, we think about a car. A car is an object with properties make, model and color, and the methods like start, stop and move. So in object oriented programming, we group related variables and methods that operate on them into objects. This is what we call encapsulation. So for example of it, let's consider procedure oriented programming. Here the variables are base salary, overtime and rate. Below this we have function to calculate the wage of an employee. We have variables on one side and functions on the other side. They are decoupled. So now we will see object oriented programming way to solve this problem. You can see get wage function. This function has no parameters. In contrast to our procedural oriented programming, which has 3 parameters as the arguments. The reason why we don't have parameters in object oriented programming is that the variables are modeled as the property of that object, that is employee. So both this function get wage and the parameters are a part of one unit. So one thing about procedure oriented is that the functions with lots of parameters. So when you end up writing code in object oriented programming, you will have fewer number of parameters. So next we will think about an abstraction. Think about a DVD player. This has a complex working mode inside of it. So you will simply press the play button and you don't know what happens inside. So the inside complexity is hidden from you. This is the abstraction. In practical, we can use the same technique in the objects. Okay, so we can hide some of the properties and the methods from outside, and this gives a couple of benefits. The first one, it will make the interface of those objects simpler. It helps us, and the next one, it helps us to reduce the impact of change. Let us consider if we change the inner private methods, none of it will leak to the outer space. So with the abstraction, we can reduce the impact of change. So the third one concept in object-oriented programming is inheritance. Inheritance is the mechanism that allows you to eliminate redundant code. Here is an example. Think of an HTML element, text box, select and checkbox. All these elements have few things in common. They should have properties like hidden, inner HTML and methods like click and focus. Instead of redefining all these properties and methods for every type of HTML element, we can define them once in a generic object called HTML element and help other objects to inherit the properties and the methods. So inheritance helps us to eliminate the redundant code. So finally is the polymorphism, where poly means many and morphism means form. So polymorphism means many forms. In object-oriented programming, polymorphism is a technique that allows you to get rid of long if and else or switch and case statement. So back to our HTML element example, all these objects should have their ability to render in a page. The way each element is rendered is different from the others. If you want to render multiple HTML elements in a procedural way, our code would probably look like this. But with object-oriented concepts, we can implement a render method in each of these objects, and the render method will behave differently depending on the type of the object we are referencing. So we can get rid of this switch and case statement and use one line of code like this. So here are the benefits of object-oriented programming concepts. Using encapsulation, we can group related variables and functions together, and this way we can reduce the complexity, and now we can reuse the objects in different parts of the program or in different programs. With abstraction, we can hide the details and the complexity and show only the essential. This technique reduces complexity and also isolates the impact of change in the code. With inheritance, we can eliminate redundancy code, and with polymorphism we can refactor ugly switch and case statements. Thank you.